Hello, welcome to the Casa Sol Psychology podcast, or I should say, welcome back. On this podcast, we talk about everything trauma, neurodivergence, and the nervous system. Today's episode is all about sleep and how trauma and ADHD affect our sleep. Okay, before we get into sleep, what do we need to understand about the nervous system? Two very important parts of the nervous system are the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is activation, fight or flight, freeze or fawn. That's usually when our heart rate will increase, our pupils dilate, our breathing increases as well, and all our energy goes towards movement, towards our muscles, and towards survival. On the other hand, parasympathetic nervous system is kind of like the break. It's the opposite. We calm down. That sometimes it's called rest and digest. Our heart rate slows down, our breathing slows down. Generally, our muscles relax. Our energy can go towards things like digestion. Generally, that's the break of the nervous system. And why do so many people feel exhausted but still wired at night? So what happens is that we can be depleted of energy, be tired, but our sympathetic nervous system is still activated. And for example, trauma can activate it because if our bodies don't feel safe, our body is looking out for danger. It doesn't want to let us fall asleep or sleep very deeply because that would not be very helpful in terms of survival if our body thinks there's a threat around us. Bodies with ADHD generally have trouble regulating the switch between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And how does chronic stress and trauma affect our body's ability to rest? So with chronic trauma and stress, our bodies feel that we are not safe. This stress, the trauma, sends a signal to our body that we are in danger, that there is something that we have to protect ourselves from. So our body is not really concerned with getting a good night's rest, but rather than being awake enough and activated enough to survive. And how does ADHD affect sleep differently than anxiety or depression? So essentially with ADHD, kind of how I mentioned before, this regulation and switching between the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system is not well regulated. So it might not necessarily be that the body is on edge in terms of wanting to be in survival mode, but rather just a difficulty in switching to the parasympathetic nervous system and being able to calm down and go to sleep at night. So why does forcing sleep or pressuring sleep make things like insomnia worse? The parasympathetic nervous system is actually involuntary. So when we try to force it, this is not something we can actually do. And with the pressure, we create anxiety and stress, which further activates the sympathetic nervous system, further blocking the parasympathetic nervous system that allows us to wind down. And what role does hypervigilance play in getting poor sleep? So hypervigilance occurs in response to trauma, and it's this feeling of watching yourself, watching your back to see that there's nothing endangering you around you. It's a feeling on the body level as well. There's a lot happening in terms of your eyes are dilated, taking in more light, more information to be able to scan your surroundings. Your muscles are ready to contract. Your breathing is faster. Your heart rate is a little bit faster as well. This is not the type of state that we want to be in to fall asleep. So this is why that hypervigilance that really exists to keep us safe, unfortunately, interferes with our sleep. And why is consistency so hard for people with ADHD when it comes to having a sleep routine? And the answer is people with ADHD crave novelty. And on top of that, our bodies run on a different rhythm than people without ADHD, which means day to day, at the same time of day, what we might feel could be wildly different. Even if we try to follow a routine, it can be really difficult to follow because what is happening in our body, what state we are in terms of how activated we are, could be really, really different. And that can be a big challenge in creating a consistent sleep routine. And can poor sleep worsen trauma symptoms, emotion regulation, and focus? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. When we don't sleep well, we don't get that restorative sleep that repairs our mind and body. we don't have enough energy for the day, and we're not going to have enough energy in our brains to focus on focusing or being able to regulate our emotions and use the tools and the skills that we have also to handle our trauma symptoms, whatever that may look like in the daytime, like flashbacks or things like that. And how do medication and supplements interact with sleep and the nervous system? So this is actually a really interesting and broad question because there are so many types of medication. But one thing that comes to mind for ADHD is that when a person with ADHD is correctly medicated, that actually can really help them to improve their sleep and regulate their nervous system. On the other hand, there may be cases where people struggle with sleep so much, it's not a bad thing to need medication to help your sleep habits. A lot of people demonize medications, but there's a lot of times when it could actually be a really big help for someone that is not getting really any sleep and is struggling day in and day out with that. On the other hand, supplements can be great even because of the placebo effect alone. Now, don't go buying 10 different supplements, but for example, it can be good to, for example, a magnesium supplement to support sleep. And there is evidence that magnesium can support sleep, but the other benefit is that maybe if you're worried about getting quality sleep, getting enough sleep, falling asleep easily, instead of worrying, there's an actionable step that you can take when you take the magnesium supplement. And I find that to be really helpful for me and for a lot of people. And when should someone consider getting some labs done to rule out physiological factors? So in an ideal world, always everyone should be getting regular checkups and letting their primary care physician know when they're having sleep issues and insisting on getting some labs done to check what's happening with their health to see if there might be another cause not related to mental health necessarily that's interfering with their sleep. And how does exercise in the daytime help nighttime sleep? So this is really important for everybody. Remember, we talked about the sympathetic nervous system and how it creates this extra energy. So for anyone, and especially those with ADHD or trauma, exercise helps to burn off the extra energy and adrenaline and cortisol that our body is giving off when we do exercise. And that is really important to burn off that extra energy that might be inhibiting or stopping the parasympathetic nervous system at night. So really, I think everyone should be getting regular exercise, and that is actually foundational for mental health, for any mental health concern, and especially trauma and ADHD. And what are some good nervous system informed ways to start improving sleep? And like I already said, exercise is key. In addition to that, we have nutrition. Maybe if we haven't eaten enough, that can interfere with sleep, or if we're not eating consistently, or even if we maybe ate too much. So that's something we want to pay attention to in terms of being able to make it easier for our body to fall asleep. And I know that might sound basic, but a lot of people do neglect that, and it's something to pay attention to. The other thing is going to therapy. That can be therapy for your trauma or your ADHD, someone that can help you to manage your symptoms, and especially with the trauma, not just manage the symptoms, but process the trauma and process the root cause. All right, that concludes today's episode. And if there's one thing I hope you can take away, it's that if you have trouble sleeping, you're not broken. It's just that maybe your nervous system is alert for a reason, or that it has trouble regulating the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. If you know someone that might benefit from hearing this podcast, please send it to them. Thank you for listening to the Casa Sol Psychology podcast. I will catch you guys next time. Bien.